Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the International Workshop on Adolescence, SRHR, and HIV, 2024's inaugural abstract writing workshop. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Chelsea Coakley. I'll be one of your co-facilitators today. I'm from the University of Cape Town in South Africa. I'd like to introduce you to one of our workshop chairs, Dr. Hermes Ishani, who oversees the Adolescents and Young People Program at the National AIDS and STI Control Program in Kenya. Over to you, Dr. Hermes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let me put my video on. Thank you so much for inviting me to this meeting, and I'm grateful to be part of the meeting. I think I'm supposed to give a few opening remarks before we start the workshop. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our amazing participants from around the world. I'm Dr. Hermes Ishane, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our first ever abstract writing webinar, part of the International Workshop of HIV, SRHR, and Adolescence 2024. As the local chair for the conference to be held in Nairobi, Kenya in October 2024, I am honored to kick off this event aimed at supporting you to contribute your abstracts. Our theme this year is Building a Brighter Future, Staying Ahead of the Evolving HIV and SRHR Landscape. It reflects our shared commitment to innovation, resilience, and proactive adaptation in the face of dynamic challenges. Adolescence is a critical period, as we all know, and for young people living with or at risk of HIV or experiencing SRHR challenges, navigating these changes can be quite complex. Some of the challenges include sexual coercion and intimate partner violence, lack of education and information, very high rates of early and unwanted pregnancy, which is something that we see a lot in our country, Kenya, lack of access to health services, especially for contraception and safe abortion, gender inequalities and harmful traditional practices. I know I can't go much into all of that, and risk of STIs, including HIV. Not forgetting that they also have a lot to deal with the changes they're experiencing as they navigate adolescence and transition in life. While their biological processes are universal, the social context within which they occur vary considerably. So even as we work towards the conference in October, I think these are some of the issues that might come up. Our collective mission is to support young individuals, ensuring they have access to necessary resources, knowledge, and care. And it is my hope that the outcomes of this webinar and the conference as a whole will increase opportunities to this success. The primary objective of this webinar is to help you craft compelling abstracts that will form the backbone of our conference discussions. Your abstracts are not just summaries. They are the spark that ignites dialogue, inspire innovation, and drive progress. We aim to achieve several key outcomes, and these outcomes include knowledge sharing, and we hope to disseminate the latest research findings, even innovative practices and effective interventions in the field of HIV and SRHR to empower our participants with the knowledge and tools necessary to address the evolving challenges. Number two, networking. This event will provide a unique platform for networking and collaboration. Number three, policy and practice impact. One of our goals is to influence policy and practice on a broader scale. The insights and evidence generated from the conference should inform and shape policies, programs, and practices. And lastly, but the most important, youth engagement, because we know the adolescents are at the heart of our discussions. We aim to amplify their voices, understand their needs, and involve them in shaping the solutions that are needed. I'll now hand over to our youth representative, Cynthia, and also Trevor, I think he's on the call, who will provide more details on the abstract topics. Thereafter, Nonto, Chelsea, Sia, and Lokoma will take you through the webinar content. So let's get started. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Cynthia's over to you and Trevor.
Hey, thank you, everyone. I hope you can hear me well. A good morning, a good afternoon, and a good evening, everyone. My name is Trevor Imojel. I'm from Uganda. I'm one of the youth this year that will be one of the co-facilitators of this session. And I'm very, very privileged to be on the call. Delighted to see all of you. And my roles for today are simply to take us through the critical sessions that we are going to be having today. So beginning with this is our inaugural abstract webinar. And yes, this is going to help you learn how to write the compelling abstract. It's going to help enhance your skills in writing abstracts that you believe are captivating and can, give you that edge. So my role mainly today is going to just go straight to the abstract categories that we will be writing about. And I believe through this call, if you're a seasoned researcher or if you are just starting out, we hope that by the end of this conversation or by the end of this entire webinar, you have learned and picked practical tips on how to write abstracts that can sell, So I will begin. Without wasting any more time, I'll go straight to the categories that we do have for the abstracts for this year, and we can just see them in front of us. So beginning with, we have adolescence and HIV, that is treatment, care, and prevention. So that is the first abstract category. So for this one, depending, because during this call, we are going to learn the two types of abstracts, whether you're writing the scientific or you're writing the one where you're having lessons learned. So from this particular category, we want you to give us, if it's the scientific one, what are the latest updates, on your end in terms of HIV treatment, care, and prevention for adolescents? Or if you have programs that you're running and you're writing lessons learned, what are the lessons learned in treatment, care, and prevention in terms of this particular demographic, and that is the adolescents. Secondly, we have adolescents and sexual and reproductive health and rights. In brief, that is adolescents and SRHR. We would like to get from you, if you're interested in this category or this aligns with your line of work, we want to understand very keenly from you what are those exciting things about SRHR that have an impact on adolescents. One of the key hot topics we have right now is CSE, and I believe we'll be seeing quite a number of abstracts coming from this category, but that is just an example. So here we want to excite you in writing more about adolescents and SRHR and how do we, what is the impact of SRHR on adolescents, when you look at across the scale. So that is to really trigger us on that. And then we have adolescents and health systems, integration and differentiated service delivery. So here we are looking at health systems and how effectively they are serving the adolescents. So here we still need to hear from you. How is service delivery how is service delivery effective for adolescents? In my country, we have an issue of the youth-friendly services. I believe this can fall somewhere here. We also have integration of services and bringing health of the adolescents into priority as well. So we want to learn from you. What are your experiences? What can you bring in terms of knowledge to this research pool that this conference this year is very interested in? So we want to pick some of those critical things from you. And then we have adolescents and STIs. This is very, very critical. We want to understand in your perspective, how is adolescent, during your work, what have you seen are the most pressing STIs that are affecting adolescents, and what could be the drivers of this, and what are the recommendations that you can offer in your research that will help address, and bring down these STIs that we are seeing with adolescents. And I believe that as we are writing abstracts within these categories, we are also thinking about the theme, we are thinking about the broader picture and ensuring that everything falls in line with really pushing the agenda of the adolescents and young people. And then we have the next category, which is adolescents' general health and well-being. including the NCDs. So here we want to pick from you really. What is it that you want public health to know about this particular demographic of adolescents when it comes to NCDs? What is pressing? What is key? What is really something that you're interested or you're inspired to write about in your abstract, in your work? So this is something that we want to see coming out strongly: adolescents' general health and well-being, and including, of course, the NCDs. So we look forward to you bringing out this clearly for us. And then we have adolescents, content, platforms, and health. I believe this is to do with digitalization when we look at this point. So here we want to understand what is the impact of digitalization or digital health platforms on achieving health outcomes for adolescents. We want to understand in terms of the quality of the content, what do you have to write about that? What about the platforms that we are using?
Recording stopped.
That you believe the adolescents, what do you think really, how do we use technology, how do we use the digital space to push for better health outcomes among the adolescents? And then we have adolescence policy, legal aspects, consent, rights, and stigma. Here, very importantly, we want to understand how the legal frameworks, how the policies, how these, the legal frameworks, how these structures are connected to young people and the adolescents, and how effective they are in improving the health outcomes of the adolescents. So here we are looking at stigma. Is stigma something that is still very, very rife, very prevalent in your community, and how can we address it? So all this is going to be through your writing. Your abstracts are going to be revealing through the experiences and through the latest data if it's a scientific abstract. And then finally, we have the category of adolescent populations with unique needs, rights, and perspectives. So here we want you to write out very, very well for us through your abstracts, through the work that you're doing. How can we advance health for adolescents with unique needs? How do we ensure that we protect their rights? How do we ensure that we create an environment that is convenient and that is well facilitated for this category? So I've been able to discuss the abstract categories that we do have, but I believe you'll get this information even after this call. But this is just for us to know that we are going to be writing these abstracts in the two types. But of course, if you're interested in a particular category, please ensure that it is in line with what I've just mentioned. And of course, we will be having, if you have further questions or if you have inquiries, please reach out so that we can be able to answer them. Thank you so much. I beg to submit for now.
Thank you, Trevor. What we also wanted to highlight was the fact that we've got two types of abstracts, and this is in line with the philosophy or our thinking around what is learning. We want to highlight that our abstracts are accepting both null findings, findings of the negative where something didn't work, and findings where something did work. We know that typically when we do our studies, we go through a learning period and we don't have a chance to always share those learnings. And yet those learnings can be very helpful to other colleagues. Same thing with advocacy. We try many different ways to reach those we want to influence: stakeholders, policymakers, caregivers. But we're not always successful, yet there is so much to learn within the different strategies that we employ. So we just want to emphasize that when we talk about the different abstracts, what we learned or what the outcome was, we're not just talking about positive outcomes. We're also talking about outcomes that had no differential effect. We're also talking about outcomes where the outcome was not what you anticipated. The workshop provides an opportunity to learn, and learning can take different forms, from what works to what doesn't. And this is really what motivated us to have these two types of abstracts: lessons learned and the traditional research. The abstracts are still contained to 340 words, And in the next set of slides, we'll talk about how to structure those 350 words so they speak to the categories that Trevor just introduced. Next slide. In the remainder of the session, we'd like to get feedback from you, although we can't see you, through something called Menti, which is basically an online platform that we'll be using to get your responses, as well as the chat box. We'll be asking you to put in some of your thoughts. For this first activity, if everyone could grab their phones if they have them, if not, they could open up a website and join us in completing this poll. That will only take about 40 seconds. And if you can just make sure that you don't close that website or you don't close that page on the phone, because we'll be coming back to this poll as we get more into how to write an effective webstract. Next slide, please. On the poll, you should be seeing a question that basically is asking you to reflect or to share with us right now what you are thinking of submitting, whether it's a lesson learned abstract or it's a traditional research abstract. And hopefully in the next slide, we'll start to see your responses popping up. The QR code is still there, available for you to participate with. And so is the website. You just go to menti.com and you enter that code to share your thoughts. And the question is simply, what type of abstract are you thinking of contributing to the conference or the workshop? It's very exciting to see a lot of lessons learned and a number of colleagues saying that we'll also be doing a traditional research format. We're going to give you 10 more seconds to just quickly add your responses, and then we'll move on shortly. Amazing. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Please do continue to participate in the next sections where we are having some polling. Next slide, please. Next slide. Amazing. So what is an abstract? Many of you might know what an abstract is, given you've been reading, you've already decided to come to this workshop, so you've probably been thinking about how to summarize a body of work that you have been working on for a submission to a conference. This particular workshop is quite unique in that it brings both scientists, policymakers, programmers, and young people. So our knowledge is different. So what might feel quite familiar to you as we go over the different aspects of the abstract might not feel familiar to someone else. So please be patient with us as we go into the nitty-gritties of all the different components. What an abstract is, it summarizes a major aspect of your work in a prescribed sequence. It aims to really do two things. For you, the writer, it wants to communicate what you find important about your work. For the reader, it is meant to motivate the reader to want to learn more about what the writer is doing. Next slide, please. There are 4 sections that are highlighted on our website in terms of how to structure the abstract. The background, the methods or the description. That wording will differ according to the type of abstract that you're doing. Results if you're doing a traditional research article, or lessons if you're doing a lesson abstract. Conclusion and next steps. These all just aim to give us a very clear picture of what is the major aspect of your work. Next slide. I would like to give you just a minute to read this abstract. And then in the text box, just highlight to us one thing that you found compelling. By compelling, we mean unique, that stood out to you, or that made it clear. So take the moment to read this abstract and think what made it compelling to you. You could write, no, it's not compelling. But what made it clear to you? What makes it unique? And what makes it easy to read if it is. If you're done reading, please feel free to drop a comment in the chat about the abstract. If you found it clear, what you found clear about it, what you liked about it, also what you didn't like. In this abstract, we've color-coded the different sections. So the first part that we've color-coded in blue is what you would call the introduction. And you will notice that the introduction is roughly about 2 sentences. What follows in brown is what we call the methods, and we'll go a bit deep into what the methods look like. Next are the results or the findings, or the lessons learned. And lastly, in green is the conclusion. What you see from the abstract here is that the majority of the abstract focuses on the methods and the results or lessons learned. Next slide, please. So what are the different components? How do we strategically decide what to communicate to a reader? Next slide. The background is the context. It is meant to provide the general topic that you are discussing or that you would like to discuss. Then it is meant to zoom in into the specific question that you will be addressing with your methods and with your results. You are aiming to provide a rationale for why you're doing this work. Why does the community need this to be investigated? Why is the work important? Those are the big questions that the background aims to address. Typically, one just needs 1 to 2 sentences to achieve this. And let's take a look at a few examples. Next slide. Pre-exposure, the one you just looked at, is an efficacious HIV prevention tool. That's the general topic. It tells us what PrEP is and why it's important. The study aimed to understand the preferences of PrEP delivery and modalities among AGYW mothers in an observational cohort. The next sentence then zooms in and tells us specifically what the study or this article will speak about. Another example of an introduction. Understanding social gender norms can support improved prevention and care outcomes. This is a general topic, social and gender norms. The second sentence reads, our work explored contexts surrounding violence for AGYW living in Lusaka. Then it horns in to say specifically, we will be addressing this subject within the topic. And our last example of a background. The INSPIRE framework is a global package for preventing and responding to violence against children. So this introduction tells us that we're looking specifically at this policy, INSPIRE framework. However, there is relatively less empirical evidence on the impact of the INSPIRE framework in reducing sexual violence. So within this framework, we will be looking particularly at sexual violence. So the background, it situates the work. General topic, what are you looking at? But it also ends with a specific topic, what you will be addressing in this abstract. Next slide, please. The methods and the material. In this slide, we focus specifically on what we think, no matter the type of abstract, whether it's lessons learned or traditional research the method should include. It should include something relating to the study design. Is it a focused group? Semi-structured interviews? Is it cross-sectional? Is it an RCT? Who ended up participating in your work? Were they community members? Did you invite them through networks? Were they randomly selected according to their household size? And what is the geography? We all know that although this conference will be looking at HIV, that this pandemic differs in how it shapes according to different contexts. Eswatini might be different to Lusaka. And understanding the setting is so important when we think about translating the findings to different places. And then the sample size. How many people? Was it a focus group of 2? A focus group of 10? Was it a cross-sectional study of 98 people, over 1,000 people? Who are they? Are they the young adolescents before the age of 15, or are they older? The methods is really crucial in letting us know who these results belong to, how we interpret these results related to the individuals who participated in this work, and therefore what conclusions we can draw for this particular sample population. Next slide, please. Additional specific elements within the methods and materials differing by the type of research are now listed in this table. For traditional research articles or abstracts, we expect a bit of typical structured language. Was it a cohort study? Was it a focus group? Was it participatory engagement, right? We expect some comment on the type of measurement that was done. Was it self-reported? Is it abstraction from clinic records? Was it a test that was done? This all speak to different notions of accuracy and validity. And so letting us know the type of measurements that you used, including how you defined some of your outcomes. For an example, was viral suppression 50 copies per ml or 1,000 copies ml? Was engaging in a parenting intervention attending all 4 out of 5 sessions, or was it just attending 1 session? For program implementation, it is really important that we understand who the target population was and how the program or the intervention was structured and who could participate at different elements. For advocacy, we're hoping to see who was involved in stakeholder mapping and engagement. How did the process look like? Was it iterative? Did you just do one-time meetings? Is it notes-based? And so different ideas and different understanding of what shaped the process is very important for advocacy. You would like to say it is simply what you did, and often we struggle what the methods or materials are. But just think about it, what did we do? And just write it down. And then look at it and say, what are the key things that are important to telling someone about what we did? And that will help you narrow and identify which elements should remain in the methods and material. Next slide, please. So an example we have here, methods. Community conversations were held with 3 groups of adolescents in October of 2022. Survivors of violence, those living with HIV, and those who were married. We use serostatus neutral recruitment to explore broadly how violence among adolescent girls and women happens, how HIV and violence can exacerbate one another, and how potential stigma can be mitigated. Sessions were conducted in the local language and were audio recorded and participant consented, translated, and then were transcribed to English. 2 authors thematically analyzed the transcript, generating and refining codes and themes. You can imagine a lot of activities happened to what I have just read out loud to you, but they have identified who the population is, the setting, the time period, in addition to how recruitment was done, and then lastly, to the approach they had for the analysis. Next slide, please. Let's look at a quantitative one. Using data from 4 years of a cohort study of 1,519 South African adolescents, we examined the association between Inspire provisions and reduced risk. Parental support, positive parenting, and parental monitoring. Economic security, 2 items on food security, receipt of any household grant, affording for necessities. And if you continue to read the methods, you will see that the writer here explicitly tells us how they measured their outcomes. This could be very important when you're contributing towards an abstract where parental support can be defined in multiple ways, where economic security can be defined in multiple ways. And so speaking to what your measurements are can really help the reader in understanding how to interpret your results and what to think about the conclusions and implications. So for quantitative, it's important to think, what are your measurements? Are they standardized? They differ across different ways of measuring it, and therefore being quite specific how you measure it will give better insight to understanding the work that you did. Next slide, please. The results, what everyone is always looking forward to. Next slide. In the results, you want to be precise, you want to be clear and succinct. You want to be precise, relating exactly to what you said you were going to hone in, your specific topic that you stated in the background. You want to be clear. You have just described to us the measurements that you use or the outcomes that you're going to look at. We want to be clear in understanding what you observed regarding those outcomes. And then you want to be succinct. You want to be short and sweet. The examples below are just things you want to avoid, right? Response rates differed significantly between boy and girl patients. A better way to phrase that would be like, response rates were higher for boys compared to girl patients by 30%. You could add a p-value if you have one. That is much more clear and it's precise. It tells us exactly what was happening. Adolescent girls, young women, and boys discussed several themes related to empowerment. This is not a very clear or precise statement. One could be adolescent girls spoke about their agency to buy items at a superstore in comparison to boys who spoke maybe about their agency to just have money for airtime. These are just random examples, right? So being quite clear and precise is very important within the abstract. You're not summarizing the results, you're giving us results of the major element of your work. Many people started to listen to us. So in your advocacy work, your results should speak much more clearly. Caregivers engaged on the topic of consent around sexual behavior for boys and girls, right? So what are they listening to? You want to be as specific and clear as possible. Next slide, please. So looking back at the methods we share, we'll just go over this one qualitative results. Norms contributing to the perpetuation of violence included power differentials between men and women, elders and youth, as well as social expectations of adolescents to adhere to prescribed roles in relationships. Participants cited family and community roles in ascribing blame to girls rather than boys for experiencing violence, as well as social sanctions in disclosing of violations. Role expectations included accepting violence as part of marriage. They also described occasional examples of resistance to norms or deviation. So here we're getting quite a clear picture of what were the power differentials. They've listed them, they've given examples in comparison to boys, in comparison to girls. At the end of reading the results, you're not left still wondering what were those power differentials. Same thing with your results and lessons. you want to be thinking about, at the end of the results, have I adequately highlighted the specific topic that I introduced in the background? Or is the reader still left thinking, what are the results? Next slide, please. The conclusion is the so what. Apologies. I think one thing to highlight the previous slide is that we will not, unfortunately, be able to accept any abstracts that speak about potential results will be available or this will be later available post-July. So something to be mindful of. I know sometimes we are very eager to share our work while we're in the process of analyzing, but please note in this particular instance, we'll not be able to be accepting any results that relate to outcomes are yet to be confirmed later in preparation stages. The conclusion is the so what. You did this work, so what? What does it mean for the population that you are working with, for your organization or those people who are working in the same sector as you, and for other individuals who might be implicated or have implications for their work? It has to be directly linked to your work, so it can't be too far-fetched. There has to be direct ties to the results that were presented. Next slide, please. Let's look at the PrEP example. The conclusion reads, we urgently need to increase awareness and knowledge of PrEP options among adolescent girls and young women, with long-acting PrEP modalities being most preferred. Integrating PrEP delivery into other services already accessed by adolescent girls and young women, such as family planning and SRA services, will be beneficial. So here we see that the results that said few people knew about PrEP, the so what is we need to increase awareness. The results that said adolescent girls would prefer modalities that are long-acting are encouraging those who are working on these modalities to focus more on how to make long modalities more accessible. The conclusion is linked to the results. It's not too far removed from the results. Next slide, please. We'll be thinking now about key considerations when writing, in particular with language, in addition to the evaluation criteria that we'll be using in the workshop. Over to you, Chelsea.
Thank you, Nontokozo. Next slide, please. Great. So here we're going to talk a little bit about the language that you use now that Nontokozo has introduced us to the critical content and the sequencing and structure to be followed. So we want to emphasize the use of person-first language when you're creating your abstracts. The reason for this is that Trevor mentioned earlier, stigma continues to be an enormous challenge for us to overcome in the HIV space, and we know that is well documented. There's a detrimental impact of HIV stigma on health outcomes. So one way that we can address this, people living with or at risk of HIV experience stigma and discrimination, and using problematic language can perpetuate this. The HIV space is still rife with terms that are laden with stigma and blame. As abstract and journal article reviewers hosting this call, we do unfortunately still come across some problematic language. Some examples could be HIV-infected person, patients failing on treatment, or person who became infected. To us, language really matters, and our language should match our goals. We really want to ensure that everyone is supported to enjoy the highest attainable standards of health, as is their fundamental right. All of this is contained within a very important piece of guidance that we wanted to share with you called the People First Charter. This is a resource for you to access. It's available in multiple international languages, and it encourages the use of person-first language, and it explains some of the reasons for this, which I've shared with you. But simply, It means that we put people before their condition, recognizing that people are people and not defined by their condition. So an example here is adolescent living with HIV instead of HIV-infected adolescent, for example. So conferences like ours, as well as researchers like our community, program implementers, policymakers, journals, healthcare providers are encouraged to promote and use appropriate person-first language. So please do access this detailed guidance and inspiration and share it with your colleagues. Next slide, please. So now we'll talk a little bit about the abstract review and evaluation process. So the abstracts for this conference that are submitted are reviewed by the scientific committee. There are 35 members of the scientific committee that will review abstracts submitted before the deadline, which is July 5th. We'll remind you again about that at the end. The scientific committee is selected by the organizing committee and the conference secretariat, and they're selected based on their significant contributions and commitment to this field. They assist the organizing committee by providing suggestions around speakers, topics, and they review all of the abstracts. So what are these abstract reviewers looking for? We wanted to start with what we think is one of the most important factors, which is significance. And this is both scientific, methodological, and theoretical significance. Or if you're writing about a program or an intervention, it's very important to explain and justify why is this programmatic approach an issue that you are trying to address so important? Is there a gap you're trying to fill? Has it been documented? So this should be clearly stated and clearly formulated, as Nontokozo mentioned. Also, another area of significance that reviewers look for is the novelty of the methods and the knowledge that you are producing, the contribution you're making to this field by conducting the research or sharing the lessons that you've documented. Moving on to the methods, which have been described in detail previously, but what we would be looking for here is really how well designed and appropriate or fit for purpose the methods are that you are sharing in your abstract, as well as whether they're clearly articulated. Is there missing information that's really critical to understand in your analysis plan, or in the way that you collected the data or recruited participants? Next slide, please. Finally, relating back to Dr. Aimei's introduction, we're looking for relevance to our conference's topic, theme, and the abstract category that you select to enter your abstract under. Trevor reviewed these at the beginning, and they're available very clearly on the website of the conference. We're also inviting and looking for clear writing, organization, and this last point is really important. It's something we often see, a really well-written abstract, but then when the conclusion comes, there may be conclusions or suggestions that are not well supported in the data presented. So please make sure when you finish your conclusion that you go back and check your data, check everything you've written before to make sure there's a coherent story and thread throughout. And finally, just to emphasize what Nontokozo mentioned, research that is to be completed or to be discussed will not be accepted by the conference. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to hand over to my colleagues Flokoma and Sianai to do a deep dive and a bit of workshopping on the abstract. Please get your devices ready to engage again in some Menti surveys. Over to you, Flokoma.
Thank you, Chelsea, and thank you, Nontokozo. So yes, please, could we please get our devices ready so that we can scan we can scan the QR code on the next slide, please. So just to give you an idea of what we're going to be doing next, so we will be running a poll. So after we've heard all of the steps and tips and things to look out for when writing an abstract or preparing to submit an abstract, we will be looking at examples on a qualitative research study abstract, and also an abstract on a quantitative research study. So I'll just give you a few seconds to scan the QR code so that we get started with the poll. Okay, I hope we are all ready. Okay, so this is our second poll after Nondobozo's poll. So I'll be asking two questions on tips on how to write a qualitative abstract. So the question is. Yes, so the first question, the methods section of a qualitative research study abstract should provide details such as the study design, the setting, the participants, the sample size, the intervention, or the duration of the study. So the first response, or the first option is no, only the study design should be provided. And the second is yes, it should include all of the items listed above. So yes, that's right. So the response is, as Nondobozo had said before, it should have all of the above: the participants, the duration of the study, and where the study took place, and also the sample size, and also the study design. So it is important that in an abstract we see how the data was collected, and also we see what type of data was collected, and also where this data was collected. As Nondobozo did say that situations might differ country to country, and also we should also indicate what type of subjects or participants participated in this research, and also if it's a qualitative study, maybe how many young girls living with HIV were interviewed, or maybe participated in a focus group, and also if there is an intervention involved that is being maybe analyzed, we could also say that this intervention, this analysis was conducted on a certain intervention over a certain period of time, so maybe over a year, over months, but all these have to be included in an abstract, but they should be done briefly because we want to show that this is some kind of a brief representation of what this study is, but one should understand where and how, and where, the how, the who of the study in a brief way. And then we go to the second question, please. So the second question asks, when writing the findings in the abstract, always include a quote with each theme or finding. So we can also continue to the questions, to the responses for the second poll. Thank you. Okay, I think we can. All right. Okay, so I think I can just quickly give the response, because at first it seemed as though the second option was taking over, and then now it seems like, okay. Yeah, the second option has more positive responses. Yes, providing themes or findings is enough for a qualitative research abstract, because in an abstract you want to be brief and succinct, as Nandogoza said, and straight to the point. So just providing just the themes that came out of the findings is enough. Also, because if you now want to add quotes, there might not be enough space. The word count might not allow you to add quotes to accompany the themes. So yeah, just the themes or the findings in brief are just enough for an abstract. Then the quotes can come in the actual presentation when you present the themes at length. So we will look, can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so we'll take a closer look now at an abstract that was presented at last year's conference. So this we will look at the methods section of this qualitative abstract. So I'll just read it and then highlight the specific sections that I mentioned in the poll. The poll and the methods. So I'll talk. Okay. So the abstract reads: Khanyisa ngemfundo is a life through education is an ongoing multi-stage mixed method study based in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa that aims to, one, understand support structures and wider community-based infrastructures that exist in supporting pregnant adolescents and adolescent mothers. 2, co-develop a training toolkit for school-based support teams working with learner pregnancies. As part of the first aim, we engaged with stakeholders from 4 youth empowerment CSOs, civil society organizations, to facilitate in-depth engagement with CSOs. We developed a semi-structured interview guide to gauge how they support school return of pregnant adolescents and adolescent mothers, what sexual reproductive health services they provide, C, partnerships they forge in delivering services. Data were analyzed using an adaptation of the Coward et al.'s analytical framework for exploring facilitation of service delivery, community education, awareness raising, and building and promoting partnerships and networking. So as I mentioned in our poll, the methods section will show the study design, where the data was collected, and who the data was, so who the participants of the study were, and also how this data was collected. So here it's semi-structured interviews. It was collected in the Eastern Cape province of South Africa, and we used a multi-mixed method study. And then also you could also include here how the data was analyzed. So it was analyzed through a specific framework, and these were the components of the framework that were in the framework that was used for analysis. So this was an example of what should be contained in a qualitative research study abstract. And this is a living example of what we saw on the questions of the poll. Next slide, please. And then we look at an example of the results section of a qualitative research study abstract. In the early stages of this presentation, Dr. and Chelsea said that we should make sure that we present findings on data on data of research that has been done, not ongoing, not to be done research. So you could submit preliminary findings of a research. So this means that part of a study or a certain stage of a research study has been conducted and finalized. So you could indicate that these are preliminary findings of study that has as a next phase that will be continuing, but maybe the analysis has started but is ongoing on this particular subject. So this abstract shows that there are like just specific themes that came out of the qualitative research data. So the findings are highlight that when supporting pregnant learners and preventing further apparent pregnancies, CSOs in schools cannot operate in isolation. So it also goes to highlight another finding that peer mentoring is crucial when it comes to supporting pregnant adolescents and adolescent mothers. And then the third finding, peer mentors, for example, champion nurses in local clinics play a critical role in linking pregnant adolescents and adolescent mothers to social workers and healthcare services. And then it continues to read to the end. But you see, the main findings or the main sections of the findings section are presented in this abstract, and they are presented in a brief and straight to the point manner without having to show or give examples of what is constituted under the first finding or the second finding or the third finding, just so you are brief and straight to the point and clearly presenting what the findings are showing in the results. Thank you. I'll give over to CNI.
Thank you so much. Let me just see what's happening. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Logoma and colleagues. So my name is Yanai, and the structure of the quantitative abstract is going to follow what Logoma has already done. But so the focus really is on quantitative results. So if you've got a quantitative analysis that you are sort of doing, and you want to submit an abstract. So I'm going to just try and take you through that. So the first poll question, if we can get the first poll question, is asking you what part of writing the method section do you find the most challenging? So you can choose any of these three, and then I'll try and go through tips on how to deal with each of these. So I'll just give you like 60 seconds to try and see what we have. All right, interesting. So it looks like one which looks at describing procedures clearly, as well as the third one, adhering to word limits. That one is still a challenge to me also, but so it looks like these two are the most challenging to everyone. But I'll just go through each of these to try and just give tips that one can sort of follow. So the first one, which is blue, describing procedures clearly. I think one of the important things, and I'm going to use examples in the next few slides, but just to give you tips. The most important things is to, in the methods, when you're trying to describe procedures clearly, is just to identify the core methods. So what is the primary method that you use to analyze your data, and just avoid to, putting all the jargon and all the other information that is not relevant. And also try to follow guidelines. So most of the conferences, you've got like abstract guidelines on how to write the components of the method section. So try to adhere to those guidelines. And the other thing is the method section has got a structure and a flow. So try to prioritize information, and I'm going to use an example to try and illustrate this, but try and prioritize information on the different components that Nontogozo and other colleagues highlighted about this method section, and put the information in sequence that will help you to see what you can remove, to try and also address the word limits. And I think the other tip around the blue bar or describing procedures clearly is to try and be specific, right? And just provide clarity on, for example, if the sample size is 980, then just say it. Or measurement tools, if you use the structured questionnaire, just say that. I think that will help, among other sort of considerations or tips that are available. And then the second one, which is the bigger one, adhering to word limits. That one is a big one, but I think it still revolves around trying to prioritize content and using abbreviations wisely. When you've introduced sort of a term in the introduction, you can just use your abbreviations across other sections, including the methods. So that can also help. And also try to combine sentences where possible, if that's possible. And one thing that has also helped me really is getting feedback from colleagues. Get colleagues to read and also give you feedback. That can help you to adhere to word limits. And then the last one, which I see people don't have really, we've got a few people that have challenged with that, is summarizing the statistical analysis steps. I mean, I like this part because it helps me, say what I did or what methods I used. So I think here, just focus on key analysis, key methods, as I said, in the first component, and report important metrics such as p-values. Conventionally these are being used, and as well as confidence intervals, your effect sizes. If you're going to use these, you can bring that. But there's also standard reporting. I think we can find standard reporting on some of these analysis steps. But clarity and being conscious that some of the people reviewing your work might actually not know the method that you have stated is important. That can also help you to try and summarize the steps. Our next question. So the next question really is about the results section. So to try and think about which sections or what you find most challenging about the results section of the abstract. And really the reason why I'm focusing on these two is because they are the biggest chunk in the abstract. Just 60 seconds and you guys can just go through this. Great. It looks like presenting statistical results clearly, not just listing percentages and odds ratios, is the one that is dominant. But I'll also just try and highlight some, tips around this, and I'll use an example in the next few slides to just show you some of this practically. So I'll start with the first one, which is deciding which results to report first. I mean, I think few people have challenges with that, but just to say that here you identify key findings, right? You may have 16 findings in your analysis, but just identify what's key and what's relating to your hypothesis or your research question. And I try really sometimes to focus on significant results if that is what your hypothesis was sort of testing. So that is really important, and think about findings that contribute to your conclusions. And then prioritize, as I always say, these sections have got structures. So structure them, and they've got a sequence and an order. You start with the most sort of important. I mean, all results are important, but you start with like the bigger result that you found to attract attention, of course, from the reviewer, and you go up to the list, of course, results that you might want to present in your results section. And I'll emphasize that results that you present in this section should be relevant to your objectives, and also think like broadly about impact as well as novelty. Highlight those results that are significant or that are novel, as I would say, or just to attract interest. Then the second component, which is presenting statistical results clearly and not just listing odds ratios and percentages. I think here it's just also to try and follow guidelines of statistical reporting, such as including means or standard deviations sometimes, or medians, interquartile range, just for specific important results. And one important thing in quantitative analysis when you're presenting your effect sizes is to make sure that you include your confidence intervals, because those help to gauge your results. And also ensure that your statistical terms as well as symbols are used correctly. So if it's an odds ratio, then it's an odds ratio, then state what the effect size is. And if it's a risk ratio, then say that. And then the last thing around this second bar, which is in purple, is consistent formatting, that can help you to present your results clearly. I think the third bar, which is in red, making it clear which group you are referring to, really this relates to your objectives. So if it's a comparison study, you're comparing prevalence between two groups of a population, then you can present that in a comparison manner. But if it's not the focus of your objectives, then you try to just stick to the group that you are describing and what you're finding. Next poll question. Excellent. So this poll question relates really also to the methods, but just to check, when you read each of these, which ones do you find that they provide comprehensive picture of the methods or what the researchers did? So I'll just give you 60 seconds to try and work through that. Just select one that you think really represents what you want to, or what the researchers did. Do you have any results yet? Thank you. Great stuff. So I'll just try and, try and pick the important bits on this. I'm sure people have read the two extracts from an abstract. But I see that most people, thank you so much for inviting that. Most people have selected the first one, which is, most comprehensive. Which says that world child visit attendances was abstracted from routine clinic records for 453 children aged 18 months and above, including 170 children of adolescent mothers living with HIV, and they give a percentage of that. And then we compared vaccination rate and HIV testing of children using descriptive statistics and disaggregated by maternal HIV status. But what I wanted to highlight, compared to the next extract, which is sort of really a summary of the first one, is to say that the first one really says what the researchers did, where this child visit attendance was obtained for and how. So I was really attracted by the word abstracted from a routine clinic record. So I can imagine what the researchers did here. And the other thing really that, attracted my attention when I was reading the first one is, clarity on what the researchers want to do. So they are comparing the vaccination rate and HIV testing of children using, descriptive stats, and there's got an extended analysis which disaggregates that by maternal HIV status. So that is important. And really, this links to the other components that we discussed before around word limits, around precision, around, what's important and what's not important. But just to try and make sure that the person reading your abstract is outside. Remember, the person reading your abstract is outside of what you did. So you must give them enough information to imagine what you did. Thank you. Next slide. Yeah, so this slide really is just an illustration of what we've been talking about. This is an extract from the methods section of an abstract that we submitted to AIDS 2022, but the linked publication is down there. We put the DOI link for you to access the actual manuscript. For you to read. But really, this study was looking at the impact of intimate partner violence on adherence to antiretroviral treatment among adolescents living with HIV. And I just sort of extracted this method section just to highlight the bits that are quite important. And what I wanted to emphasize, in the first line, for example, is to show the reader that this analysis is from a cohort. So it's a longitudinal analysis to some extent. And so that is important. I want to know, for example, when I read your methods, to know whether this is a cross-sectional study, or is it a longitudinal study? And that can be supported really by the methods that you use also. And the other component just next to that is we give like brief information about the descriptives about the population that we are studying and the sample size. So wanted to highlight that. And also the context. Where did we get this data from and from whom? Adolescents living with HIV, from the Eastern Cape province. And what did we use? All that is contained within that extract, structured questionnaire and how long, the period and all that. And what method did you specifically use for this particular analysis? Then we state what method we use, and that links to the data that we have really well. And one other thing that you want to highlight is really your outcome. If you've got an outcome, predictor outcome or mediator outcome, just highlight that. Try to find a way to highlight that in the methods so that, and it should really link to your objectives. And any other extra analysis that you do following the main objective should be at the end of the method section. As you can see, after doing our main analysis, then we did a moderation by sex. So that highlights also that the method section, as I said, has got a sequence and order of priority, in terms of what we are going to do. So this is just an example. You can read more on the actual paper with the linked abstract. Next slide. Thank you. This is just the results section, and really the points are the same. The tips that I spoke about around this, it's linked to the same paper, same manuscript, same abstract. So just to highlight also like the sequence of the results, we start with the main outcome. What is the bigger findings that we see here, and then we go into the, the big model that we did there, which was looking at the association between these two things, IPV and adherence. We show that, and we also present the effect sizes. We do say these are adjusted odds ratios and put the effect sizes, confidence intervals, and you can also include p-values, really. But you can see that we summarized all that in one sentence, and those are the first big findings of that study. And then the rest of the other stuff that we also found, in addition to that, we present in sequence as you can see. And you can see the last sentence, which says moderation results showed similar associations between sexual violence and adherence to ART by sex. So if you remember the structure of my method section, the results section almost sort of tries to follow that in some way. That's really some of the tips that I can give colleagues on how to do some of this stuff. Please take a moment, just read the paper and also understand what the adolescents are facing, some of the challenges and how we can deal with those. Thank you so much. I think that's all. I'll hand over to colleagues, Trevor and Cynthia, for the closing. Thank you.
Thank you, Sia. At the moment, we've had colleagues who have been so kind to share their questions in the chat. So we'll just be going over those questions right now. Chester will be leading for the next 7 to 8 minutes. If you haven't had a chance to pop in your question, please feel free to do so. Over to you, Chelsea.
Thank you, everyone. We have a few minutes left, and we've received some of your questions. The first question is, what is the best way of presenting the results section when your analysis is still underway or when only preliminary results are available by the time of abstract submission? So this is challenging because in some ways, we really don't want to submit incomplete research where we do not have results. However, we would encourage you, before you write and submit, take stock of what type of study or program you're involved with. Think about the type of abstract you think it fits, and then decide, how far are you from being finished? Do you have final results? So this will differ, of course, as I said, according to the study or program. So for quantitative research, from our experience, we know that analysis can be iterative and your results can change with peer review. But at the stage of submitting an abstract, it would be important for you to have run and submit the best analyses you have at that point in time. For qualitative work, it really depends, again, on the type of analysis you're using and your study design. But at the point of deciding to submit an abstract, you should have identified clear patterns and themes that you would write up in a full paper. For more advocacy or programmatic-oriented abstracts, you should have clear enough results and to be able to document and clarify how you generated those results or findings if you're not using research methods. I hope that answers the question, and I'm going to hand over to Ntokozo for the second question, which is, I struggle with retaining much of the important information that needs to be addressed while also being as concise as possible and fitting within the word limit. What tips could you offer that would be helpful? Ntokozo?
That's such a good question, and I think many of us do. So this is quite a well-shared experience. I'll share maybe 2 tips, right? So I think if you're struggling with deciding what is the main thing to include, try and follow the rubric of the sentence structure that can be allocated to each section. So the introduction, 2 to 3 sentences max. The methods, 3 to 4 sentences max. The results, same, 3 to 5 sentences max, and then the conclusion, 2 to 3. So start with that rubric where you contain yourself within this sentence structure. And then read the abstract and say, does it convey what I know is important and is what is crucial from this work? If it doesn't, then you can start eliminating the elements that you have initially included in the abstract, but are actually not that important for the work. I typically recommend, think about the 2 big results that you want to speak about. You can't talk about 5, 8 things. Pick your 2, 3 if you're really, really lucky. But you want to then isolate those to 2 things that are quite important. I'll link this to the other question about what makes an abstract unclear. It's when we try to say too much that the reader gets lost. So in abstract, you want to think about the major contribution that this work is making to the subject area. Make it brief, make it clear. You are communicating to an audience that is, I typically say, smart, but just needs your guidance in what you did. So the more clear you can be to the smart audience, the more likely that you will also be able to get your abstract through. So introduction and conclusion, 2 to 3 sentences, methods and results, 4 to 5 sentences. Look at it. Is it saying what you think is right? The important thing, yes or no, and then take out. Back to you, Chelsea.
Thank you. And I can see lots of questions are coming in, so we hope that we can catch up with them and address as many as possible in the last few minutes. So the next question was about, why do abstracts often get rejected? So I would suggest, going back into the previous part of this presentation where we talked about some of the selection criteria. I'll give some examples. I think something that we tend to see a lot are sort of narrative abstracts. So it's sort of like a long story about something that was done. It isn't structured according to the sections and headings that Nontokoso encouraged you to think about and follow, and to stay very kind of concise within. So sometimes it's unstructured content. So it makes it really hard to figure out what actually happened here. What was the process followed? What did they find, and how is this important to an important contribution to this work in adolescence? So that's one of the common pitfalls, is unstructured sort of narrative stream of consciousness writing, perhaps. The other thing I mentioned was when there's a lack of alignment with the conference's main focus or population. So this is a conference that's really unique in that it's uniquely focused on adolescence. It also has broadened this year to include not just HIV, prevention, treatment, care, support, but also sexually reproductive health and rights. So we encourage you again to go back to the website, read about the theme, look through those abstract categories, and before you spend a lot of time writing and thinking, to just make sure that your work aligns with what the conference is trying to achieve and share and learn. Lastly, actually 2 more points. I think we often see a disconnect between the conclusion and what's written before it. So here, if we think about more programmatic abstracts, make sure that your conclusion relates back to the lesson learned that you're trying to convey and the process you followed to learn that lesson. In the conclusion for research, it's very important that we can link it back to your analysis that you followed and the resultant findings that you presented. Lastly, I spoke about people first language. So use of problematic, harmful, stigmatizing language would also really hurt your chances of being accepted. All right, so moving on to the remainder of our questions. I'm going to be passing these between our co-facilitators because there's quite a few of us. And there was a great question on artificial intelligence. And we have a team member who is particularly interested in this area, and I like to consult for advice, Sia and I. How can one leverage artificial intelligence to construct impactful abstracts? Sia and I, would you mind answering that for us?
Yeah, thank you so much, Chelsea. Yeah, it's a very good question and a great question, to be honest. So in the era of AI, I think we are all sort of overwhelmed by these different technologies that are coming up. And one of the things I think that is important to know is that these tools can help you structure your thoughts. You know, they can. And also they depend on your prompts, what you ask them. And so that is really like still sort of a gray area, but I think you can use that to sort of help you with structuring, as well as, you know, reducing like your sentences and all the other stuff. But yeah, it's still sort of something that I'm still also working on to try and understand how we can leverage some of these in especially in research. But definitely, there's some basic things like sentence structure, you know, and all the other things, and also like the ideas that relating to maybe your research question, it can help you with the structuring. But I think at this point, my sort of advice will be, do not rely entirely on the AI models, because they also have limits in terms of where they get the data and timeframes of the data they are using or they've been used to train. So yeah, that's important. But really, let's keep on working to try and find out how we can use this to enhance our research. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sienna. And then we have a question about advocacy programs. I'll try and answer that one. What is the best way to showcase the impact of advocacy programs across different countries based on granting small grants to organizations that made an impact? So what I'm going to do is try and take you through each section very briefly with the minutes we have remaining, and suggest what you could cover. So if we think about the background, describe why this advocacy is necessary, the context for the issue that you're advocating about. For the methods, it would be important to explain how the advocacy program was designed. Who did it involve? What were its aims or intentions? And then also in the methods, how did you capture the lesson learned you're presenting in the abstract and that you hope to share with the wider audience? Around the lesson itself or the findings, you would present, of course, what you learned in as much detail as possible. And then in the conclusion, this is really the significance. Why is this lesson important to others? What comes next? What will this advocacy lead to? Okay. We have 1 minute left, so unfortunately we can't answer all the questions that have come in, but we do want to share some reminders before this webinar ends that are really important. I'm going to hand over to, just one thing that we can answer within 1 minute is there was a question around the word limit, 350 words. You absolutely can submit an abstract that is less than 350 words. We just will not accept abstracts that are more than 350 words. Okay, over to you, Trevor and Cynthia, to remind us of the important timelines before we close. Next slide.
Okay, thank you all. We'd like to appreciate you for your persistence in staying to the call until the end. My role is just to take us through the timelines as we end the session. So the first one is abstract deadline is 11:59 p.m. CET. That is on the 5th of July. So 11:59 p.m. CET, that is when, the abstract deadline meets. And so beyond that, no abstract should not be accepted. And then the registration deadline is 6th of September. So we have the early career investigators who are going to be within this period. So we have the early career investigators, academia from resource limited settings. Then we have youth, that is 25 years or younger, who are also going to be receiving free registration. So that is a unique package for the youth below 25. And then we have 30 years or younger receiving 50% discounted registration. So 30 years younger will be receiving 50% discount in registration. And then we strongly encourage you to review conference guidelines. That is very, very important, even as you're writing the abstracts. Very important that you review the conference guidelines, what is expected, what are the principles, so that your work can be accepted. That is also one reason as to why we're eliminated, because sometimes you're not adhering to the guidelines that have been set. So with that, I'm also observing time. You can still find this information outside this room. This is going to help you, to guide you as it was. However, yes, finally, on resources, the recording of this webinar will be available to watch on demand. So on demand, you can request and it will be given. Abstract submission guidelines, topics, and deadlines can be found on our website. And then for contact for questions regarding abstract submission, please contact Christina. That's Mustakaki. I believe you can see the details displayed. That is Christina.Mustaki at amededu.com. Yes, that is for us to get this information just after this call. So thank you all for your interest and passion in attending. We want to wish you all a very wonderful good morning, afternoon, and evening, wherever you are. Thank you all for being a part of this session.